8-6 meets 8-6 Sunday at 4:25 at Ford Field.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I welcome in everybody. Matt Dery, Locked On Lions. Chris Carter, Locked On Steelers. It's the Thursday crossover brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. A couple of 8-6 teams going off and going at it and squaring off at Ford Field Sunday, 4:25. Big CBS game. Yes, Jim Nantz, Tony Romo. I mean, it doesn't get much bigger than this. And Chris Carter, the Steelers obviously have won 2 in a row and then have looked better as of late. Lions need this game. There's a lot of intrigue going into this game on Sunday, isn't it?
It's a lot of intrigue. And it's funny. You look at it, Matt, and you see two teams, I think, that some people, maybe one team that people kind of expected maybe would be 8-6 because they've been hovering around, 10. They've been 10-7 for 2 straight years. And another team in the Lions, I think a lot of people expected to be much better than 8-6, but both dealing with their own struggles, finding their own successes. I think it's going to be a really interesting matchup between these two styles of teams, and especially because the Lions get to face a longtime nemesis in Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, no, we'll get into that. We got matchups. We certainly have to discuss how each team is going to win, storylines as well. Let's start in Detroit, Chris. Like I said before, a must-have really for the Lions right now. Yes, there is a path that if they lose Sunday to the Steelers and they win their last 2, that they can get in. But I think Dan Campbell and everybody knows they've got to win these last 3. They can't win 10 games and get some help and hope for the best and lose yet another home game here. And if they were to lose Sunday, it'd be the first time they've lost 2 straight games in 3 years. And this is not a bad Pittsburgh team coming in. This is a Steelers team that looks the best it's looked in a while. I know you know more than I do on that team, but in watching Monday night, you saw some confidence with that Steelers team. There were no fire Tomlin chants and Acrisure the other night, and they look crisp. But Detroit just knows they've got to play. They got to play better. They can't give up 40 points again like they did to the Rams. And obviously, this is a different Steeler offense than what we saw with LA and that high flying Rams offense. But storyline here is the Lions have to win, and they're in a weird spot because, like you said, this is an 8-6 team that a lot of people think is really, really good, whereas the Steelers at 8-6, people are like, how are they there? But the Lions have to show they can play pretty good football and do so Sunday against a good football team. What's the talk in Pittsburgh right now?
Talk in Pittsburgh right now is that the Steelers, I talked about this yesterday on Locked On Steelers, but there's a sense that maybe this Steelers team is built for a run better than the last Steelers team, because people remember the Steelers. They were 10-3 at one point. They were in complete control of a lot of things, and then they lost 4 straight to end the regular season, and then they lost their game in the playoffs, effectively losing 5 straight to end the year, and things looked bleak. And it was like, man, this team just crashed and burned so fast and so hard. Is this whole organization going to do that the next year? And then you saw the wholesale changes, not the wholesale, excuse me, but they got rid of Russell Wilson, they got rid of Justin Fields, they went and got Aaron Rodgers, they traded away George Pickens, they brought in DK Metcalf, they made so many different things happen there, and now they're at a point where where the Steelers are saying, like, hey, they've been juggling with themselves all year, and they went and got other guys like Jalen Ramsey instead of Micah Fitzpatrick. They added Darius Slay, and in doing all of that, they thought that they would be a one kind of a team. And I asked Mike Tomlin about the effectiveness of changing styles as much as they have throughout the year, but they started this year, Matt, as a team that wanted to run a lot of single high coverage because they were going to trust Slay and Ramsey and Joey Porter Jr. to just run and cover and play, man up and single and live on islands and run the show. And they thought that was going to be the key of their defense. Well, it wasn't. They were getting shredded left and right, especially Ramsey and Slay. They switched it to a 2-high look where Ramsey backed off into a safety. They cut Darius Slay, and now an undrafted guy named James Pierre has been really good at corner. They just brought in Asante Samuel. He's playing well, and another free agent, Brandon Eccles. And now the secondary looks even better than what they thought it would look like. Same thing on in the last 2 weeks. You've seen a flip of the offense. They went and elevated Marquez Valdez-Scantling from the practice squad, and then then signed Adam Thielen and off the waivers. And so they got those guys in. And now instead of being a team that runs like the heaviest 12 and 13 personnel packages in the NFL, they're a team that's been using a lot more 11 personnel the last 2 weeks. And so they're a team that I think people look at like, wait, with this new style, with the way that they're playing and the confidence that they're finding, even they beat the Dolphins without TJ Watt, which before that game, they were 1-11 when TJ Watt didn't play. They're also missing Derek Harmon, who, when he does play, they hold teams to 96 rushing yards per game. When he doesn't play, they had been allowing 193 rushing yards per game. They held the Dolphins to, I believe, under 70. And so for them to play the way they did and to see the changing styles, there's a lot of excitement about who the Steelers really could be in crunch time.
MVS, Adam Thielen, the Steelers going to sign Golden Tate next. Maybe Calvin Johnson.
Alan Lazard just cleared waivers. Don't hold your breath. He might be coming to Pittsburgh.
That's a good call. By the way, you mentioned before about you asking Mike Tomlin some questions. I enjoy the Coach T pressers, and I also enjoy some of your analytical questions to him. I know your voice. I know it's you. And there's times I see an eye roll, and there's times that he seems to enjoy your questioning. So,
Mike sometimes Mike has this phrase that say, "I'd rather say whoa than sick 'em," and so, like, the other day he was like, yeah, it was this week where he on Tuesday, and I asked him a question. I was trying to piece together, like, how does he coach to have continuity while you're making these big stylistic changes in the middle of a season? And I mentioned one on defense and one on offense, and he was like, well, you said 11 personnel and you said this. And I was like, yeah, I'm talking about just the fact that you're changing them so much. And he was just like, man, you're stressing me out. And I was just like, I'm sorry, Mike, my bad. And it was funny when he was walking off, he was like, hey man, you're trying too hard. I was like, all right. Oh, but I'd rather say whoa than sick 'em, because I'm trying. That's what he said. Because I'm trying to get what I can. Because there's sometimes he's giving me an answer that I'm like, ooh, that's perfect. Because then that ties right into what we're talking about that week. So he didn't give me this time, and there's been another time or two where he's been like, nice try. I'm not going to give you that one. But Mike Tomlin's a very smart coach, and he's very smart both as a coach and on the podium representing the team. And that's where it's like, as a reporter, I do kind of love the back and forths that I get with him sometimes.
It's interesting. Here, Dan Campbell right now, not panicking. Certainly their backs are against the wall. They're looking up in the division at two other teams, which they have not done in 3 years. And what's interesting, I found with Campbell on Wednesday, and I mentioned it on Wednesday's show on Locked On Lions, was he knows it's going to be bully ball again this week. And the Lions got bullied a little bit by the Rams. Rams put them at the line of scrimmage, both offensively on the O-line and the D-line as well. At times manhandled that Lions rush attack. Jahmyr Gibbs is only averaging about 3.3 yards a carry the last 3 games. But Campbell expects the Steelers to be very physical, and kind of, I think these are two teams that play with the same kind of identity. I think Dan respects what Coach T has done in terms of the physicality and how the Steelers play. Have they been as physical as they have been in the past this year?
So here's the funny thing is they came in trying to be one of the most physical teams in the NFL, and they weren't at first. They were getting pushed over on defense in the run game. They weren't able to get the run game to be consistent. And in fact, that had also been a case just a couple of weeks ago. But this past week, they bowled over the Miami Dolphins. And I think that they're seeing the potential of what they want to be with the run game. They have obvious guys like Darnell Washington, who is just very physical out on the edge as a tight end, as a blocker. They've been a physical team when they've played well. When they haven't played well, they've gotten pushed around. So it's been very up and down. But you look back if you get a chance, look back at the Colts game that they played this year, and they were coming off of 2 really tough losses where they looked like they were being bullied, and they were up against a good offensive line, Quentin Nelson, that whole crew, Jonathan Taylor, and they held Taylor to 55 yards. And unless that changed this past weekend, I believe that his lowest rushing yards that he's had all season. And so when they lock in, they are very physical. But I think the problem is they have a lot of guys on the defensive front that are young and still figuring out their pace to this thing.
That is Chris Carter, Locked On Steelers, Matt Dery, Locked On Lions, Thursday crossovers. We get you ready for Sunday's game, CBS 425, the late game with the big crew that's coming in here for what should be a very, very interesting football game. We've got some matchups coming up next. What key matchups does Chris see that the Steelers need to win? Same with the Lions. We'll do that coming up next here on a Thursday, Locked On Lions and Locked On Steelers. And as we told you earlier, this program brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. Yes, the holiday season, one of the best times for sports. Bowl games, Big basketball matchups, playoff pushes. It's all happening at once. And while we're all making choices every day, one of the most fun places to make the right call is at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest way to get in on daily fantasy. You just pick more or less on at least 2 player stat projections, lock in your lineup, and you're in the game. It's simple, fast, and available in 45 states. That includes California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. Prize Picks has added an extra layer of excitement to a holiday sports schedule. You create a lineup, takes less than a minute, and the app makes the whole process smooth and intuitive. And it's not just NBA or NFL. You can do NBA and other sports as well. Plus, the new Stacks feature lets you choose the same player up to 3 times in one lineup, like more on QB's passing yards, touchdowns, and rushing yards. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL. You'll get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Matt and Chris, I'm back with you. Thanks for making us your first listen, everybody. Checking us out wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, our Everydayers Club, I'll tell you about in a little bit as well. But shouts to our Everydayers, and check out Locked On Steelers with Chris, Locked On Lions with me each and every day. All right, Chris, matchups for this week. This I think is the most obvious one, so you and I will share this one. But Aidan Hutchinson against a rookie left tackle and Dylan Cook. This is where Aidan eats. Lion fans that get on Hutch for at times in games, you don't hear his name. They go, "Where's Hutchinson?" And obviously he's one of the best edge rushers in the game, and he's just gotten paid. But man, he really thrives against backup tackles, and that's exactly what he'll see on Sunday. Correct?
Yes, expect Dylan Cook, a guy who's been practice squatter for basically 3 years now, and he got promoted because the Steelers are just ravaged right now at left tackle. Broderick Jones was their starting left tackle. He got a neck injury. He's on injured reserve. We don't know when or if he'll be back. Then they had behind him was Andres Pete, a veteran that they brought in. He got hurt with a concussion, and then they brought in Calvin Anderson. They thought Calvin Anderson could fill in, but Calvin Anderson suffered an injury in practice, and he's done for the season. So now you got a 4th string, undrafted Dylan Cook, who filled in during the Ravens game for his first ever NFL action and then made his first ever start against the Dolphins. And against the Dolphins, he had 30 pass protection snaps and gave up 0 pressures. And they were sending pressure his way. Now, part of what the Steelers did was they slid protections his way. They gave him a couple of extra tight ends. Isaac Seumalo, longtime veteran and former Eagle. He set a really good tone for him, and he does a really good job communicating and keeping guys in line. So he really helps. But certainly, Aidan Hutchinson, the Steelers have been saying he's a game wrecker all week. Mike Tomlin said it Tuesday. Aaron Rodgers said it today or Wednesday. And so they're very much aware of how much he can destroy games. And heck, they go up against one like that twice every year with Myles Garrett. So they're familiar with it. But now it's trying to account for a guy to make sure he's not in over his head. And I think that's going to be a major focus for the Steelers to help Dylan Cook and keep Aidan Hutchinson from getting just plenty of one-on-ones to torture him with.
What other stuff stands out when you look at these two teams? Obviously, I know TJ Watt has not been 100%. I know Herbig was hurt. What else can you tell us about how you're looking at this matchup?
Well, that's the other thing is that the side of the other side of the ball there, the Steelers, TJ Watt had a collapsed lung. If you were in the Lions side, you don't know what's going on there. So he had a collapsed lung from a dry needling therapy incident. We don't have the full details on what happened there. All we know is that he hasn't been at practice. Mike Tomlin said there's no new news on TJ Watt. JJ Watt came out on the Pat McAfee show and kind of said he's working through things. So it doesn't look good for TJ Watt playing in this game, unless he just shows up Friday and just says, "I'm back," which kind of would be TJ. He likes to be dramatic sometimes, not too often. But I don't think he's going to do it this week. I think the team's going to be like, "Hey, buddy, we need you for the long haul. So we need you to if you feel back, let's give it some time and make sure you're back before you do something worse." But you're right. Behind him, Alex Highsmith is the team's next outside linebacker. He's been playing at a very high level this year. And then you have Nick Herbig, who's the third-year guy out of Wisconsin, who's been really sharp, really quick. But he suffered an injury And that's also something that's worrying the Steelers, because now that he's suffered an injury, now you're going to be calling on guys like DeMarvin Leal, who's a fourth-year guy who was originally a defensive end, who they moved out to outside linebacker because he was just too small. And that's going to be a big question for the Steelers, is how do they want to handle this if Herbig and Watt are out? Because for years, whenever and also Nick Herbig did not practice Wednesday with a hamstring injury. For years, when TJ Watt went down, as I said before, they were 1-11 when he went down. And partially was because they didn't have backups that were ready to go. Even when Nick Herbig was a rookie, it was kind of like, that's kind of rough to ask. But this year, when Alex Highsmith's been out, when Nick Herbig's been out, they've had at least two other guys in Watt and Highsmith, or Watt and Herbig, to hold down the fort. And this past weekend, it looked really good with Herbig and Highsmith holding down the fort while TJ was hurt. But now with two guys down, now you're kind of getting back to where you were a couple of years ago, like when they lost TJ Watt in week 18 and then had to go on the road to play Josh Allen and the Bills in their house in the playoffs. And TJ Watt was gone and they didn't have much answers for it. So that's going to be something that if I'm the Lions, I'm going right after not just Dylan Cook on with my pass rushes and Aidan Hutchinson. I'm going right at whoever's the backup outside linebacker on away from Alex Highsmith, and trying to check, hey, how much are you on your game this week?
Yeah, the Lions need to start running the football better. I mentioned before about Jahmyr Gibbs, and look, he's a special talent. He's as good a running back as there is in the NFL. David Montgomery as kind of a backup. Find me a better backup running back than Monty and how good he is. The Lions got to get back to running the football and doing it consistently. The interior of that offensive line has had its issues. Obviously, when you're messing with guys like Cam Heyward, who have wrecked games for years, that's something to watch, is the interior of the O-line against the interior of that D-line of the Steelers. But like you said, when Jared Goff has time to throw, I mean, if you looked at the start of the season, went, oh man, week 1 was so bad against Green Bay and Goff was harassed, and you go, and you say things like, this O-line better get better because in week 16, they face TJ Watt. So not having to face him, if that's the case, and if Herbig's out, that gives Goff time to throw. And when he gets time, especially in that dome at Ford Field, against that secondary that, like you said, is very questionable, that could be a huge advantage for Detroit in this game. But I still think they want to ground and pound, because when they've lost games, they've gone win-loss here since October the 5th. They want to get back to the ground game after a loss, and that's exactly what I think Dan Campbell and offensive coordinator Johnny Morton are going to do. Yeah,
I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's funny, the Steelers secondary, they were at one point really shaky, but now, like, if you look at Joey Porter's coverage numbers, it's really good. James Pierre didn't practice on Wednesday, which, maybe people are like, who's James Pierre? But you look at his coverage numbers this year, they've been really good too. If they can get Pierre and Porter back, and then Samuel's still their guy off the bench, it gives them extra depth outside corner. They like Brandon Echols in the slot right now. And when Ramsey and Duggar are playing, they've been really good playing a lot of too high looks and giving a lot of looks, and kind of limiting what teams want to do through the air when they've been on their game. But I think the problem has been combining that with good run defense consistently this year. The last couple games, they've done a much better job at containing it. Like Derrick Henry, he got 95 yards, but it took him 24 carries to get there. And they're like, okay, you're not going to break the game open. Devon A-Chain, sure, he averaged 5 yards per carry, but it was 12 carries for 60 yards, and they only got ever one first down off of the ground in Miami. So if I'm the Lions, I'm trying to push this defense especially if Herbig and Watt are still hurt, and that's a young defensive line. I'd be picking on guys. Derek Harmon coming back from injury, the rookie out of Oregon, who's a big time player. Keanu Benton, who's been very up and down this year at defensive tackle. If Y.A. Black's in there, he's a rookie 5th round guy at Iowa. There's guys who they've played well this year at times, but they've also had some stinkers. And so if I'm the Lions, I'm trying to put pressure on those guys to be consistent. So I agree with you. Run the ball.
Chris Carter, Locked On Steelers. Matt Dery, Locked On Lions. How do the Steelers win this football game? And by the way, they have a nice winning streak against the Lions. The Lions have not beaten the Steelers. Remember, there was the tie 4 years ago, but haven't beaten the Steelers since 1998. Do you remember the Phil Luckett game?
The Jerome Bettis. It's
yes.
Funny. I went as Jerome Bettis this year in Halloween, and I had a coin with me that I'd flip and they had tails. And so, because people say I look like Jerome Bettis, do I? Oh
my gosh, yes.
You see what I'm saying? Yeah, right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I just had a Jerome Bettis jersey, and I would just be like heads tails. So
I love it.
Yeah, but absolutely, that game is remembered in infamy in Pittsburgh because that thing ruined everyone's Thanksgiving.
Last time the Lions beat the Steelers. All right, let's get into how these teams get a win. We'll do that coming up next here on a Thursday Locked On Lions and Locked On Steelers. It is the crossover brought to you by Prize Picks. All right, folks, we got to tell you, though, about our Everydayers Club here on both Locked On Lions and Locked On Steelers. Thank you for making our shows your first listens of the day, and thanks for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Now, you already live your team, whether you're a Lions fan or a Steelers fan, every day. Now, take it up a level, go ad-free, join the Everydayers Club, and get Locked On Lions or Locked On Steelers with no interruptions. You got members-only Discord access and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedonlions.supercast.com or lockedonsteelers.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. 8-6 Lions, 8-6 Steelers, Ford Field on Sunday. Pittsburgh, of course, trying to win the AFC North and hold off the Baltimore Ravens. Lions looking to win 3 straight games, hopefully get the Bears in Week 18 for a shot at the playoffs right now as they look up in the standings at both Green Bay and Chicago in the NFC North. All right, Chris, how do the Steelers win this game? What do they have to do to get it done on Sunday?
What don't they have to do? They need to come out and they need to live up to their philosophy, and the philosophy that's been with Mike Tomlin and Bill Cowher. It's the bedrock of the Steelers. Stop the run. You got to take away the run, force them to 3rd and longs, force that quarterback to have to hold on to the football and wait for routes to develop. Let that pass rush get active, and then also let your secondary kind of play into what they're seeing happening there and try to take advantage of some mistakes. That's a big key as far as what needs to happen if the Steelers hope to make it work in this game. But they have to stop the run. If Jahmyr Gibbs gets going, it's over for this team because they're going to be put behind the sticks. Then the Steelers can't operate. The Steelers offense is most dangerous when it can be balanced. So that's another thing I would say here. They need that balanced offensive attack because they've had games where the passing games carried them like they did against the Ravens. But you saw what they did to the Dolphins, 4 straight touchdown drives from the second quarter to the third quarter. I think maybe even a little bit in the fourth. But 4 straight touchdown drives. And it was because the Dolphins, they were like, wait a minute, they're running. Wait, they're passing. Wait, they're doing an RPO. I asked Aaron Rodgers, how do you run an RPO when you're like 42? You're not fast. And he's like, yeah, he's like, I know that people, you think of RG3 when they think of RPOs, but he was fast, but I have a fast release. And so that's a big part of what the Steelers do now is they try to balance things. And so you stop the run and then you keep it so that this game doesn't get out of hand. And then you run up that balanced offense and then try to put the Lions defense in some tough spots where if they're not stopping the run well, maybe they overcommit some run help there. And then you get more one-on-ones for DK Metcalf. The new additions of Thielen and MVS, you probably don't look at the stat sheet and say, oh, well, they probably look at the stat sheet and say like, oh, well, they're not really doing much. But since they've arrived, they've opened up things for DK Metcalf because they're able to run their rights at the right timing, and that's made everything different for Aaron Rodgers in a good way. So if I'm the Lions, cannot let this offense come out and have this balanced attack because then that's when they eat.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. It's interesting. Aaron Rodgers coming back to Ford Field. The last time I believe he was there with the Packers, Lions had some pretty good success against Rodgers. Aidan Hutchinson had a tipped interception for a touchdown. Jim Nantz and Aaron Rodgers will be in the building together. And the last time that happened, you recall the Aaron Rodgers Hail Mary to Richard Rodgers years ago, which was an absolute stunner for all of us that were at Ford Field that Thursday night. But regardless, harassing him, getting him down, getting after the quarterback. They did not have good success against Matthew Stafford this past Sunday, and he torched him for over 40 points. So I think some pressure on Rodgers is going to be key. Plus, crowd would love that. That would get the crowd really into the game if you see Rodgers go down early in the game with a sack or at least some quarterback hits. And you mentioned it before about stopping the run. I think the Lions have to run the football. I think it's time to unlock Jahmyr Gibbs here a little bit. Yes, in the passing game, he's been great. Yes, he's broken off some huge plays, including in that Giants win a few weeks ago. But some consistency with Gibbs and Montgomery where they're averaging 4, 5, 6 a pop. you're getting into 2nd and 4s, you're getting into 3rd and 2s, and it's not, like you said, 3rd and long situations where for the first time this year without Ben Johnson, the Lions have had a lot of 3rd and longs that just have not worked. And I said this last week, and I'll say it again, I see something in the bag of tricks for Dan Campbell this week in terms of some sort of trick play or something that I think can just get the crowd into it, turn a game a little bit. But the offense is still number 1 in scoring. They still put up over 30 this past week against a damn good Rams team and a pretty damn good defense. But I think all those things come into play this week. And I would think that the Lions, being at home, desperate game, facing a Steelers team that is hotter than I think people expected them to be coming into this, I think the Lions are going to win this football game. But it's not going to be easy. Nothing's been easy this year for Detroit. Remember their last home win was against Dallas, was tight. And then they escaped against the Giants just 2 weeks earlier than that and needed overtime to beat a 2-3 win Giant team at that point.
Yeah, no, I'm right with you. I think that the Lions, they have the edge in this. I think they're a much more balanced team. I think they have the number 1 scoring offense in the NFL right now, I believe.
Yep.
So and they've earned that. Listen, this is going to be a tough challenge for the Steelers. And I say this, I know some Steelers fans like, what are you saying, Chris? I'm saying this is a pretty good Lions team they're going up against. And not that they haven't faced other good teams. They've beaten the Patriots. They've beaten the Colts, though. I think the Colts now have kind of fallen off. But I look at this Lions team, and they were one of my favorites to be in Super Bowl contention. I think I ended up picking the Packers to go all the way in the NFC in my Post-Gazette, my Pittsburgh Post-Gazette preseason poll. But I had the Lions right up there with them because I know how talented they are and how dangerous they are. So the Steelers are going to have their hands full, and I think that they know that. They know this is a big matchup, but I also think they've been really interesting in how confident that they've been of late, and not in a cocky kind of way, just in a kind of like we're gonna get it done because it's our job to get it done. And that's not something I think we saw. There was a lot of times earlier in the year where you saw guys abandoning their assignments to go help other people's assignments, and in doing so, opening up more problems in the defense. A guy would leave a zone wide open or not cover his man or leave a gap open in the run game because they're trying to help someone else. They weren't trusting each other. They weren't having confidence that they could each do their jobs and play to the scheme the way they're supposed to play it. And I'd say in the past couple of weeks, they've started to play a lot more confident in doing that. And I think that's going to be something they need to be on 10 about in this Lions matchup.
Watch the Lions secondary as well. Very banged up. Both safeties out. Top number 2 corner, Terry and Arnold obviously out, and DJ Reed has struggled. So keep an eye on that. Chris, great to see you. Always a pleasure, my friend, and have fun on Sunday.
Thanks, Matt. Great to see you as well.
Chris Carter with us, Locked On Steelers. Matt Dery, Locked On Lions. Thursday crossover. Thanks for making us your first listens. Locked On Lions, Locked On Steelers each and every day. Please follow us on all social platforms. Check out the shows on YouTube as well. We got preview shows coming up Friday right here on Locked On Lions and Locked On Steelers.